Alrighty, well, good afternoon and welcome everybody. Thank you for attending today. My name is Andrew Doffney. I'm the Instruction and Outreach Librarian at the New Jersey State Library. And it's my distinct pleasure to present our speaker for today, James Calaski, who is going to be talking about the Lindbergh baby kidnapping and taking not so much a traditional approach at it, but looking at a lot of the other evidence that's been out there to kind of provide a holistic approach to what this trial was and the outcome, and see if it's something that traditional history still supports, or if there's been some new things that have been uncovered. So really excited for this. For those of you who might not know, James Calaski completed his undergraduate studies at William Patterson University of New Jersey in 1998. And he also served with the Glen Rock, New Jersey Police Department for over 20 years, receiving numerous awards and citations. He continued his studies and received a Master's of Arts degree in history from William Patterson University in May of 2013, and continues to speak on a variety of topics related to New Jersey, the Lindbergh kidnapping to be one of them. So we really appreciate you being here with us, James, and we're really excited. Um,
Thank you very
before we
much.
jump before we jump into the presentation, I just have a few housekeeping items to go over. We will be taking your question at the end of the presentation today, but you can submit them at any time using the Q&A or the chat feature in the Zoom dashboard. As always, there'll be a survey at the end of the webinar, so if you have time, yes, please complete the survey. We really appreciate any and all feedback that you can give us. And if you want to read up on some of the things that are going to be talked about today about the Lindbergh kidnapping, including maybe a new twist or a new way to view it, you can check out Robert Zorn's book, Cemetery John: The Undiscovered Mastermind Behind the Lindbergh Kidnapping. And then one last thing I have for you is just a brief overview of the Zoom dashboard. This is what your dashboard should look like if you're using a PC or a Mac. If you're using a mobile device, the dashboard may look a little bit different, but all the features should still be there. In the bottom left-hand corner, you can check your audio settings. So if you're using an external listening device, like a headset or earbuds, you can check to make sure it's connected properly there. At any point during the presentation, if you do have issues, there is a raise hand button here in the middle. You can click on that and that'll alert me. I'll send you a message in Zoom and hopefully be able to resolve any problems that you're having. And then, as I mentioned, if you do have questions, you can submit them at any time using the Q&A or the chat buttons, and we'll be addressing them at the end of James's presentations. So that is all I have for you. So I'm going to turn it over to James now.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. Let me just share this real quick. I want to share this. Hold on. How are we looking there? Are we full screen?
Yep, you're good.
Perfect. All right. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be doing this for the first time. My name is James Calaski. Thank you for that introduction. I need to update that introduction. I've actually been a police officer for 26 years. I still am active law enforcement, and I do have a master's degree in history. Just a quick background for me. My father was a history teacher. I'm a self-professed history nerd, if you will. I always been interested in history. When I went back to get my master's degree in history, I did my master's thesis on the German American Bund, which is a pro-Nazi organization in the United States during the 1930s. I kind of became a quasi-expert on that, and I've been involved in several documentary films and documentaries as a researcher and also on screen. And I actually have one. Hopefully, you can keep an eye out for it. It's in. They just finished filming. I was filming last April for it, but I'm going to be on screen, and I'm also involved as a researcher for a documentary upcoming. I believe it's going to be on HBO Max on the German American Bund camps in the United States. So that's something I'm really interested in and excited about. That's coming out soon. So when I started doing, I kind of fell backwards into this. When I started doing my research, I was working with the Glen Rock Historical Society. Glen Rock is the town where I'm a police officer. And the work that we were doing, they asked me to present on it, and it was so popular that they kept having me back to present on it, and then it was kind of word of mouth that it started spreading, and then people started asking me what other presentations I had, and I didn't have anything at the time. Now I have 6 presentations that I do, and I'm currently developing other ones, but people started asking me what else do I have, and I didn't have anything, so I started thinking about different cases, different things that I can kind of bring my bring a twist to with my investigative history and background. So one of the cases that I looked at was the Lindbergh baby kidnapping, and this is something I feel that everybody or most people have heard of it. They know what it is or maybe about it, the topic, but really don't know the details. And that's kind of my forte now. I look at different things in history that, oh yeah, I've heard about that or I know about that, and then I try to bring you through. So this particular case really blends well with my law enforcement background. What I'm going to basically do is I'm going to lay out the event, the kidnapping, the crime, take you through the evidence, take you through the investigation, and then at the end, I'm going to give you my theories, or I'm going to go over the different theories that are out there, and I'm going to give you my thoughts and conclusions. So I hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoy giving it, and I'll be happy to answer any and all questions at the end. Thank you. So hold on one second. My screen is a little bit. How do I hide this? Hide video panel. Oh, give me one second. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to hide. Something's blocking my thing here. Well, I'll just deal with it. All right. Anyway, as far as the Lindbergh kidnapping is concerned, you have just a couple of the players that are involved. You have Charles Augustus Lindbergh, obviously the world famous aviator that was famous for crossing the Atlantic, immediately a world famous pilot. At the time of this crime, he really was one of the, if not the most famous individuals in the world. So this is really a superstar of his era. He would have been world famous for his exploits. And his wife was no slouch either. His wife was Anne Morrow. She was the daughter of the U.S. politician Dwight Morrow. They lived in Englewood together, and they had a child named Charles Augustus Jr., who was pictured right there as well. They had two estates. They had their estate in Englewood, which is, again, the Morrow estate. That's where they lived in Bergen County, New Jersey. And then on the right there, you see Highfields. Highfields was the estate or the home that they had in the country. It was down in Amwell, New Jersey, and it's actually technically Amwell. A lot of people call it Hopewell, but it's down in Hopewell, New Jersey, Amwell, and it was built in the woods, a rural area, and it was a couple hours from. It was a couple hours now from Englewood, but at the time it would have been about 3 or 4 hour drive to get out there. Couple people, employees that kind of take place into this story are Ollie Watley and his wife. He was the butler and she was the cook at the Hopewell estate, and they lived there full time. They lived over the garage, and they were caretakers when the Lindberghs were not present or were not at the house. Then you have Nurse Betty Gow, and she initially stays at Englewood, but then goes down to Hopewell during this event. She was basically a caretaker for the child. And you have Violet Sharp, who was a maid at the Morrow estate in Englewood, and she comes into play later on during the story. But just to kind of give you an idea, a little brief overview of some of the players in the story that we're going to be talking about. So the crime is going to be down in East Amwell Township. At the time, the Hopewell home was still under construction. It was not permanently ready for them to stay in, but their usual schedule was that they would go down on the weekend. So they would stay there from Friday and then on Monday return back to Englewood. On this particular weekend, the baby was sick, so they had to stay longer, and they end up staying in Hopewell longer than anticipated. The Lindbergh himself was in New York City on Monday. He had spent the night in Englewood. He had a speaking engagement in the city that night. On Tuesday, he actually had another speaking engagement in New York City, but he allegedly forgot about this engagement, and he ends up returning back down to Hopewell. So he did not go back into New York City. He ends up returning to Hopewell, the estate where the wife and child were. At 8 p.m., the baby Lindbergh is put down for sleep. And then at 8:25, Lindbergh returns to the Hopewell home. So it's after the child has already been put down to sleep. From 8:45 until 9:15, the Lindberghs have dinner. And from 9:15 until 9:30 p.m., they retire to the parlor for after dinner drinks and conversation. By 9:30, Lindbergh himself goes upstairs, but he testifies later on that he does not go into the nursery. So he does not actually lay eyes on the child. And at 9:45, while the Lindberghs are relaxing after dinner, they hear a noise outside. And I liken it to when you're watching TV or eating dinner and you hear something and you kind of pause and you go, what was that noise? It grabs your attention, but not enough for you to go out and investigate. But later on, when you realize something's happened, they harken back to this and they say, oh, we did hear something. We did notice something. So then at 9:50, the Lindberghs are in the library. Now, the library is directly under the baby's nursery room. And at 10 p.m., Nurse Gao goes up to do a nighttime feeding of the child. And this is when they discover that the child is missing, the baby's missing. So you have a window of opportunity, is what we call it, of between the last time the child was seen at 8 p.m. and 10 p.m. when he was discovered to be missing. This is a 2-hour window of opportunity. It's actually a pretty small window of opportunity. Oftentimes, I'll go to a burglary or a crime scene, and we have a 24-hour period, a window of opportunity, or even longer. If somebody's away on vacation and they come home, they may not have been home for several days, and we really don't know where in that time period the crime happened. In this case, it was only a 2-hour window of opportunity. The child was taken from the second floor nursery. There's a picture of the Hopewell Estate there on the right. And if you look on the upper floors, the corner windows there, those are the windows that the child was taken out of. And there was a ransom note that was left on the windowsill. So I need to, hey, Andrew?
Yep.
Do you know how I have a bar, like a audio, video, participants chat, share. How do I get rid of that? Usually it
Sure.
goes on its
If
own and it's blocking some parts of my screen.
if you hold Alt, Control, Shift, and H together, it'll make it go away.
Alt, hold
Con-
on. Alt, Control,
Shift
Shift, and H.
and
Hold on. It didn't work. Hold on. Alt, Control, Shift, and H. There we go. Perfect. Thank you so much. All right. Anyway, it was blocking some of my screen there. All right, so here's the note, and I'm going to try to read it. It's a little bit difficult. It is not in native English, but it says, "Dear sir, have $50,000," and I'm going to point out that the dollar sign is after the money, which is a Germanic and European way of writing. Ready. $25,000 in $20 bills, $15,000 in $10 bills, and $10,000 in $5 bills. After 2 to 4 days, we will inform you where to deliver the money. We warn you from making anything public or for notifying the police. The child is in good care, and good is spelled Gute, Gooch, which is a Germanic way of spelling it. And then basically what they're saying for further communications is the signature. And I'm going to show you the signature, which is those symbols on the lower right-hand side of the note there. I will show you it in color in a few seconds here. But that signature is the way that further communications are supposed to be identified as being genuine and legitimate from the kidnapper, so that the Lindberghs know that it's actually a genuine communication. So Lindbergh and the butler Watley, they immediately search the grounds. So they immediately go out, they start searching the grounds. And by 10:20, so only 20 minutes later, Lindbergh calls the New Jersey State Police deputy chief. Now, Lindbergh he's pretty famous. He's got some connections. He's an honorary colonel, and he has a direct line right to the deputy chief. And by 10:40, the New Jersey State Police and the Hopewell chief of police are on scene. And that's actually a really good response time for this. This is late at night. It's a very rural area. And from the time that a call is made to 20 minutes to have people on scene, I mean, nowadays you expect 5-10 minutes maybe, but this is a pretty good response time for the day. And by 10:50, a teletype is sent out. So within the hour, there's already a teletype that's sent out. We still use these today. These are called NCIC alerts. And basically what it does is it is a communication from police department to police department, and this is like an all points bulletin that will go out to other police departments so that at roll call or shift change, they can produce this information, let other agencies know what's going on. And then that way, if I'm a police officer and I do a motor vehicle stop, this is as fresh in my mind, and I do a motor vehicle stop and I see there's a child, maybe it raises my interest and I can investigate a little bit more. It's a way to get the word out there about this crime. So the crime scenes are, the facts of the crime scenes are, there's going to be ladder impressions that are in the mud below that window. And you can see the police there investigating it the next day. So the ladder, they can see where the ladder was placed in the mud, and that there are marks to the right side of that upper window. So they know exactly where the ladder was placed to and make entry into this window. There are scrapes on the wall below the window, and that is going to be because the ladder breaks during this event and it scrapes the side of the wall. Inside the nursery, under the window, there is a chest and a suitcase and toys all piled on top of each other, which are not disturbed. So this was what gave the police cause to believe that whoever entered the house was fit, young, and agile. He was able to, from the side of the window on a second floor window, basically kind of hurl himself into this room without knocking everything over, without making a noise, without making a mess. And that would have been very difficult to do. So they assumed that this individual was going to be fit and agile. And then they did call in a fingerprint expert. They did not get any fingerprints. I'm not really surprised. Even today, you need some ideal conditions. You need to get really good results in the prints, and you need to have some good, not every surface is suitable for fingerprints. So although they did call in fingerprint experts, the results was not able to give them anything. A 3-section ladder was found about 50 yards from the house, or 50 feet from the house, I'm sorry. And they found 2 tracks, so 2 sets of footprints from the house to the ladder that was discarded, this broken 3-section ladder, and then towards an area called Featherbed Lane. And I'm going to show you a map in a second. Featherbed Lane is like a rural dirt road. It's unmaintained. You can drive on it, but it really would not have been well used. Locals would have known about it, but it would not have been something that, people were normally on. There was no blood or mud in the nursery, and outside in the mud, they did find footprints which were small in stature and in socks, not in shoes. So the theory was the individual that went inside the nursery, he takes his shoes off, he goes up the ladder. That way he doesn't track mud into the nursery. As he's coming down the ladder breaks, and that causes him to step in the mud with his socks and causing those footprints to be outside. And they also found an old construction chisel in the yard. So this is the evidence that they have. Here is like a little drawing or illustration of what we're talking about. Now, this is not to scale. Featherbed Lane is quite a distance away from the house, but just to give you an idea of directions and whatnot, you can see the house in the lower right. You can see the footprints going out. The ladder would have been about halfway between there, and then the footprints go to the lane where they then disappear. The theory is being that there is a vehicle there waiting for them where they go, and they are able to leave the area. Police initially or immediately set up checkpoints. They track local they hire local trackers to search the area, people that are familiar with the woods and the area. They interview over 29 servants who are checked and background checked, but they have limited evidence. At this point in time, they have no motive other than money, other than ransom. Featherbed is an old country road, as I said, is not maintained. You do have some witnesses. There are 2 witnesses that are surprised to see car lights on this road at about 6:30 p.m., so about an hour and a half prior to the kidnapping window. You have another witness that sees a 1929 Dodge near Featherbed Lane with a ladder inside. So this witness actually indicates that they see a ladder, which is a little bit unusual. This is a 3-piece ladder that folds in on itself. And there are at least 2 vehicles and at least 2 people, according to the footprints and the witnesses. So what I'm trying to point out here is that there's multiple people involved in this crime. A local waitress states that she remembers 3 men asking for directions to the Lindbergh home on the Friday prior and also on the night of the kidnapping. So it could have been people that were casing the house. And several witnesses say that they saw a blue-green sedan with New York plates. We are New Jersey. We do border New York, but especially at this time in this rural area, this is a little bit south, down kind of near Princeton. You're going to be a little bit further away from New York. So New York plates are not going to be a common sight or occurrence down there at this point in time. They also say that the witnesses say that in this plate, this vehicle with New York plates, that there are three men inside asking for directions to the Lindbergh home. Now, witnesses, you take them with a grain of salt. Witnesses can be great, or witnesses can be, misunderstood, or you misrecollect what they remember. But this is what the police report indicates witnesses were telling them. So, despite the warnings on the ransom note to not contact the authorities and to not go public, Lindbergh ignores both and ends up going public and also going to the authorities. So Lindbergh publicly announces that he and his family will pay this ransom, that they want the child back. Lindbergh, by all accounts, is a type A personality. He is described as interfering with the investigation. I will take that with a grain of salt. I can tell you very often when I go to a crime scene, especially a burglary or assault or something that's, people are victimized. It's not like a state of New Jersey is the victim. It's an individual, it's a victim. People are very invested in the investigation of what's going on, and people often want to help and participate and give me information and kind of be part of it. So, Lindbergh being the celebrity he was, I don't really put too much, it doesn't bother me too much that he came across as interfering. The police would have just explained to him that, we need to do this investigation. But you can imagine if this was publicized today, the media frenzy that it would have evoked. And the same thing happened in the 1930s. There was hoaxes and quacks that came out of the woodwork. Al Capone, who was in prison at this point in time, even came forth with a statement saying that he would put his entire criminal empire to work to find the child and return him home for the small, paltry fee of his freedom from prison. So you can imagine the type of publicity that this case would have gotten. So the first note was left at the scene. On March 5th, you have the second and third notes that are delivered to the authorities. So the second note is delivered with a Brooklyn postmark, and this says that the ransom is now increasing to $70,000, basically saying, we warned you, don't go to the police, don't go public, you did both, so now instead of it being $50,000, the ransom is going to be $70,000. And then 3 days later, on March 8th, you have the third note, which is delivered to the New York City office of Charles Lindbergh's lawyer. And they indicate in this note that no intermediary is going to be accepted from the Lindbergh side, meaning they wanted a third party as a go-between between the kidnappers and the Lindberghs. And anyone that Lindbergh put forward or suggested was going to be rejected as being too close to the Lindbergh side. So they said to him, place an ad in the newspaper when you're ready. And this is a color version of that signature. You can see those three black dots are actually holes. They're physical holes in the paper, as if you put a piece of pencil through it. And then you have two blue rings with that red ring in the middle and some squiggly lines. That is the quote-unquote signature, so that they knew any correspondence was genuine and legit from the kidnappers and not some type of hoax. And now we enter Dr. John Condon from this scene, into the story. He is a retired school teacher in the Bronx, and like the rest of the Americans, he is reading about this in the newspaper. This is front page news, and he is retired. He has some time on his hand, and by all accounts, he is listed as a person that thinks very highly of himself. He likes attention, and he figures, why can't I be the intermediary? He has no connections with the kidnappers or with Lindbergh, and he takes it upon himself to post an ad in the newspaper offering to be an intermediary. The next day, the fourth note is received from the kidnappers with a Bronx postmark, and the kidnappers accept Dr. Condon's offer to be an intermediary. So Dr. Condon then is invited down to travel to Hopewell and to meet Lindbergh's to be the go-between. On March 11th, he posts in the newspaper, money is ready, Jafsey. Now, Jafsey is his self-described nickname. His initials are JFC, John F. Condon. So he dubs himself Jafsey, JFC. The next day, a taxi delivers the fifth note. So it's hand delivered. There is no postmark. It is delivered directly to Dr. Condon's home. They do interview the driver, and the driver just says he was flagged down by an unknown man of Germanic or Scandinavian descent near the Woodlawn Cemetery in the Bronx, and he was handed this note and told to deliver it to this address. This note directs Dr. Condon to go to a vacant Frankfurter stand. I'm not making this up. This turns into like a wild, scavenger hunt. He is directed to go to a vacant Frankfurter stand near the cemetery where he's to retrieve the next note. So Dr. Condon and a bodyguard, they go to this Frankfurter stand, and under a stone, they find the sixth ransom note. This directs Dr. Condon to walk along a fence. While he's doing this, he relays later on that he sees what he describes as an Italian-looking man who is walking in the other direction, covering his face. It's a little bit unusual. The authorities assume that this is an individual that's involved in the kidnapping, who's monitoring Condon to make sure that he's found the note and following the directions, but he's trying to cover his face. A second man, and again, I'm pointing this out that there's multiple people involved. A second man is inside the cemetery and calls for Dr. Condon to come into the cemetery. So Dr. Condon goes into the cemetery and meets what is a party that is now referred to as Cemetery John, and they talk to him for about an hour. John introduces himself as John. He is described as Scandinavian with an accent, and he says to Dr. Condon, "Did you got it, the money?" So obviously somebody that's not, native English speaker. Dr. Condon requests proof that the child's alive, so you want a proof of life. And during the conversation, John states to Dr. Condon that there are 5 people involved in this kidnapping, 3 men and 2 women. On March 16th, Dr. Condon receives the baby's sleeping suit, which is on the right there. It is laundered, which means it's been cleaned, and the 7th note is included, and this package has a Brooklyn postmark. So again, all the postmarks at this point in time are coming out of the New York City area. It references the symbols in the notes as signatures that this was genuine and that the suit was their proof of life. Lindbergh identifies the sleeping suit as the same as the baby's. Now, when I say same, this is a store-bought, like a Dr. Denton's type of suit. It is a store-bought suit. So he's identifying, saying, yes, that is the same type of suit that my son was wearing, but there's no way to say that is the exact suit that he was wearing. It's just the same, make and model, if you will. But they identify it as, yes, that could be from the baby. Then on March 19th, an unknown woman approaches Dr. Condon at a charity market in the Bronx and basically in Yonkers, and basically tells him she's involved and to keep following instructions, kind of keeping him on track. They also notice while they're waiting for updates from the kidnappers, they also notice an Italian salesman that is going door to door during this time. And he comes to Dr. Condon's house selling knives. They thought it was a little unusual because after leaving Dr. Condon's house, he just left and did not go to any other houses on the street. And they assumed at this point in time that this was another member of the kidnappers who was just using a ruse to see who was inside, see if Lindbergh was inside, see if police were inside, kind of getting a lay of the land of what was going on at Dr. Condon's house. Then on March 21st, you have the 8th note received with a New York City postmark, and it indicates that the baby is well and to comply with all terms. And then on March 22nd, the next day, Dr. Condon places an ad in the newspaper saying the package is accepted as being real. So basically, they're accepting this proof of life as real, and they're awaiting further instructions. They want to get this moving. They want this to move along. It's been 3 weeks now since the kidnapping. Another week goes by, so now we're on March 29th, and Betty Gow, who is the nurse, she finds the baby's thumb guard in the Hopewell driveway. Now, the Hopewell driveway is rather long. It's not like your typical driveway that could be like 50, 60 feet long. This is probably, several hundred feet long, so it's almost like a dirt road going up to the house. But this area was thoroughly searched by police and by Lindbergh. And now, 3 weeks later, they find the thumb guard, which is pictured there on the right. This is now assumed to have been, dumped by the kidnappers as like a signal to say, like, kind of like keeping it keeping it in the front of the mind, like, hey, we have your baby, let's get moving on this, which I find ironic, though, because the Lindberghs are waiting on the kidnappers to make the next move with instructions. But anyway, that's the thumb guard there on the right. And basically, this is a medieval looking device that you would put that metal piece over the baby's thumb, and then that cloth or that string would be tied around his wrist. And it was to make it uncomfortable for the baby to suck his thumb, to prevent him from sucking his thumb as a child. The next day, on March 30th, the ninth note is received, again with a New York City postmark, and this basically threatens that they're going to up the ransom from $70,000 to $100,000 if we do not settle this by April 8th. Again, I find it ironic because the Lindberghs are waiting for instructions on how to move forward, and the kidnappers, I guess they're trying to figure out how to move forward, and they just basically keep telling the Lindberghs to follow directions, which are not coming. On April 10th or 1st, they get the 10th note. This one has a Bronx postmark, and it says, have the money ready. Then on April 2nd, a taxi delivers the 11th note. Now, this time, only Dr. Condon sees the taxi driver. And he is so excited that he runs inside where Lindbergh is present in his home and delivers the note. Nobody is able to see the taxi driver. Nobody's able to interview the taxi driver, only Dr. Condon. But the note contains instructions finally, and Lindbergh and Dr. Condon leave to follow the instructions. They go to Bergen's greenhouse, and a greenhouse is like another name for a nursery or like, a landscaping store. They go to the greenhouse, and this is near St. Raymond's Cemetery, and there they find the 12th note under a table. It instructs Lindbergh to wait in the car while Dr. Condon, as the go-between, goes into the cemetery. And here he meets the same Cemetery John that he met earlier at the Woodlawn Cemetery. And Condon states that he talks to Cemetery John and he explains to him, the Lindberghs are good people. You're putting them through a lot of stress. I think you should do the honorable thing and agree to the original $50,000, which allegedly the kidnappers agreed to. So now the kidnapping ransom is now back down to the original $50,000. Dr. Condon goes back to the car, receives the ransom money, and then delivers it in a box to the kidnappers in the cemetery. Dr. Condon sees a second man in the shadows, so there's somebody watching this transaction as he does this. And in exchange for the ransom money, Dr. Condon receives the 13th note, which states that the baby will be found on the Bode Nelly off of Martha's Vineyard. Bode meaning boat, they assume, so off of Martha's Vineyard. So if you're a world-famous aviator like Lindbergh was, he gets a seaplane and immediately flies up to Martha's Vineyard. Over the next several days, the entire area is searched, but the baby and the boat, nor the boat, I should say, is not found. Dr. Condon places numerous ads in the newspaper asking for better directions. These pleas are never answered, and there are no further communications from the kidnappers. So at this point in time, the kidnapping investigation shifts from, a ransom attempt and recovery to an investigation. So the ransom was partially paid using gold certificates. If you're not familiar with gold certificates, basically, back in the day, the U.S. was on the gold standard. When we left the gold standard, the gold certificates were no longer backed by gold. They were now what we call the greenbacks we see now. But these gold standards would be withdrawn from circulation soon, and that would make this money easier to spot by the banks and whatnot. All the serial numbers were recorded, and lists were given to area banks and police throughout the area. You can see here, this is an actual little booklet that the Department of Justice gave out to the banks with the serial numbers so that bank tellers could check money against the serial number list. And this is what a gold certificate looks like. You can see on the lower left there, you can see the gold writing and the gold certificate. So it's very similar to our currency, but it is a little different, which makes it a little bit easier to spot. So now they want to start following the money, right? This is the investigation. We're going to follow where the money went. So on April 4th, the first ransom bill turns up in New York City. So it's spent in New York City, but this investigation does not develop much. Over the next year, bills are found in over 55 locations across New York City. On May 12th, the body of Charles A. Lindbergh Jr. is found deceased. The body is found by William Allen, about 75 feet off of the road into the woods. He is an African-American male. He's out driving with his employer. That's him on the right-hand side there. They're about 4.5 miles southwest of the Hopewell house, and he has to go relieve himself. He walks into the woods, and he just happens to stumble upon a weathered burlap bag with bloodstains, which was found off the road. And when he looks inside, he sees the decomposed body of a child and reports it to the police. There are some photos on the next slide or two. If you don't want to watch, you can look away. I don't think they're too bad, but I just want to give a warning out there for anyone who might be disturbed. The coroner's examination indicates that the child was dead approximately 7 to 10 weeks. So this will put it right back to the night of the kidnapping. So the theory at this point in time is that the baby was killed the night of the kidnapping and dumped a short distance from the house once the kidnappers realized that the child was dead. He was partially buried, face down, and badly decomposed, and there were signs of scavenging from animals. The left leg below the knee and the left arm below the elbow were missing, and there were organs and muscles that were missing as well. Here are some photos of the body. You can see the decomposed body there. And one thing I want to point out in the upper right photo, you can see a close-up of the toes on one of the feet being curled, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. So the toes were overlapping, and this was a sign of what was called rickets. And there were, when they talked to the Lindbergh family doctor, the doctor had observed signs of rickets in the child. They also indicated that the fontanelle, or the soft spot on the child's head, was not fully closed. The child had 16 teeth, a rather large head for his body. This is all matches for the baby that they used to identify that this was actually the Lindbergh child. And then, although I don't see it, it is the Lindbergh and the nurse claimed that the face was recognizable enough that they were able to make a claim that this was their child. For anyone that was looking away, the photos of the child are now in the past. The child died from blunt force trauma. One side of the skull was crushed and the other side had a small hole. No bullet was ever found. There was suspicion that the child could have been shot in the head, but there was no bullet ever found during the autopsy. And the report indicates that the hole was most likely caused by a stick from a police officer who was poking around during the recovery. I find that to be BS. There's no way somebody is poking a hole in a skull with a stick, but nonetheless, that is what the coroner's report indicates. But there was hair found that does match the baby, or did match the baby. And there was a homemade sleeping suit that was present on the child when it was found. This was not a store-bought item. This was a one-of-a-kind homemade sleeping suit that was made by the nurse, and she was able to identify the suit as one that she made herself. If you look, the one on the right, the black one, is the one that was found on the body, and on the left-hand side was another one that she had handmade. The baby's doctor identified the body. Lindbergh and Nurse Gow identified the body. So it was a pretty good identification. The following day, the very next day, the baby was cremated. I personally find this to be a little bit odd as a police officer. I may want to keep the evidence around. I hate to refer to a child as evidence, but it is evidence, right? This is a kidnapping that has now turned into a murder investigation. I don't know if I would want the evidence of the child to be cremated that soon, but nonetheless, the baby was cremated the next day. So at this point in time, we have a ransom that is paid, $50,000. It is paid with that breakdown of the denominations, and you can see a good portion of them, $35,000, was paid in these gold certificates. Now, the following year, April 5th, 1933, the U.S. is taken off of the gold standard. And at this point in time, there's a presidential executive order that indicates that by the, under penalty of fine or imprisonment, all gold certificates must be turned in to the Federal Reserve and they're taken out of circulation. Now, I don't know how well this was enforced. My grandparents didn't go to prison, and they've handed down some gold certificates to the family to me. So I guess my parents were federal. My grandparents should have been in prison, but nonetheless, gold certificates as they were spent, as they were circulated, would have been taken out of circulation, making them easier to spot. So on May 1st, 1933, an unknown person exchanges nearly $3,000 of ransom money at the New York City Federal Reserve Bank. Quick thing on Federal Reserve banks. We go to the bank, we go to Bank of America, TD Bank, that kind of stuff. That is a commercial bank for the general public. The banks, when the banks make their deposits, they make them to the Federal Reserve Bank. So Federal Reserve banks are like banks for the banks. So basically what happens is if you're a business, you take your day's receipts, you take your $1,000 you made during the day, you deposit into the local bank. The local bank that takes deposits from all over the place will now deposit them into the Federal Reserve Bank, just to kind of a very simple explanation of how this works. On this indication, an individual made a deposit into the Federal Reserve Bank under the name J.J. Faulkner, 537 West 149th Street. That was fictitious. They tried to look that up, and that was nobody by that name lived at that address. So this was probably one of the kidnappers realizing he had to get rid of some of the money, turning it in and trying to get a good chunk of it out with giving fake information. Shortly after, there's several other large deposits, but they are unable to identify, right? Like they have to kind of go back, from the Federal Reserve Bank to the bank and then try to figure out which deposit it came from and then go to that store and try to figure out what customer it is. So you can see how it can be difficult to trace this money. On August 20th of 1934, so now we're like 2 years away, a $10 gold certificate from the ransom is discovered at a New York City Federal Reserve Bank. This is traced back to the Bank of Sicily Trust Company, which was deposited by an unknown person. But this is the first ransom bill discovered by the bank since February of 1934, so quite a long time. But seven of the last 8 bills that were discovered had been in sequence as far as the recorded serial numbers. So what this told the investigators was that the bulk of the ransom money was still intact and that the kidnappers were spending it like in order, so to speak, as it was recorded. And because there was a long gap between discoveries, the local banks were no longer helping. They weren't really kind of catching these deposits before they went to the Federal Reserve Bank, but then the Federal Reserve Bank was catching it. And basically that said that, it's 2 years on, it's not front and foremost in everyone's mind, and they need to kind of revamp it. So what the investigators do is they want to refocus on larger gold certificates. So they say, forget about the $5 bills, forget about the $10 bills. Let's focus on the $100 bills, right? Meaning larger bills. So it'd be like today if somebody came in with a bunch of hundreds, like fives and tens are coming in all the time. You get a large denomination bill. Those are the ones you want to check. And over the next 3 weeks, 9 ransom gold certificates are now turned in by the local banks, which now cuts out that middleman, right? Now they turned in by the local banks. You can more easily match it up to where the deposit came from and try to track it back that way. So the police start focusing on the Yorkville section of New York City. This is a very German neighborhood. And from suspect descriptions gathered from witnesses and bank tellers, a suspect image starts to emerge of a middle-aged German male doing these deposits. And then on September 18th, the big break comes in the case. The Corn Exchange Bank Trust Company, I'm not making that up, the Corn Exchange Bank Trust Company in New York City discovers a $10 gold certificate. So when the police look at this gold certificate, they find 4U1341 written in pencil along the margin. And there's a photo of that actual note that was written on that bill. So they look at this and they say, that looks like a license plate. So let's focus on deposits that were made from mechanics, gas stations, that kind of stuff. And on that particular date, there were 5 deposits. So they go out and they interview these uh, businesses. And when they visit the Warner Quinlan Oil Company at Lexington between 127th and 128th, they speak to the manager, and the manager recalls writing the license plate on a bill. He says, yeah, he goes, a customer came in and paid for 98 cents worth of gas. Could you imagine that? 98 cents worth of gas, and he pays with a $10 gold certificate. And the manager, knowing that we're now off the gold standard for some time, he's afraid that if he takes this bill, it may not be accepted and he's going to be on the hook for $10. So he questions it. And the customer states to him, don't worry about it. I have 100 more just like it at home. It's good. So the manager says, you know what, just in case, I'm going to write the license plate down of the vehicle in case the bank doesn't accept it. He describes the male as a 32-year-old with a Scandinavian type accent. And when they run that license plate, it comes back to Richard Hauptmann of 1279 East 222nd Street in the Bronx. And lo and behold, he drives a 1931 Dodge sedan. The witnesses at the scene the day of the kidnapping described a 1929 Dodge sedan with New York plates. Here is a picture of his vehicle with the license plate and the gold certificate that cracked the case. So they immediately begin surveillance and background investigation on Hauptmann. Hauptmann is a German immigrant. He lives with his wife, Anna, and their 1-year-old son. He was a carpenter by trade, but he was unemployed, and he had been unemployed from around the time of the kidnapping. He lived in the German neighborhood of Yorkville, which was at this point in time a sparsely settled area of the Bronx. 223rd Street was actually a dirt road. I've been to this area in New York City. I can tell you it's not a dirt road today. There's a photo of Hauptmann there on the right with his wife and his child. So again, multiple a rural area of the Bronx, dirt road. This is a very high-profile case. Multiple agencies are on scene, and this obviously attracts complaints and calls to the local police, right? You're in a rural area, and all of a sudden there's all these cars with men doing surveillance outside. They don't know, the locals don't know what's going on. They call the police on the police. It's actually kind of funny. But anyway, on September 19th at 8:55, Hauptmann exits his home and he drives off in the suspect vehicle. So the police follow him with the hopes of catching him passing more ransom bills. But due to the manner of driving, he was, not stopping at stop signs, making, doubling back, driving fast, making a lot of turns. The police felt that he was aware of the surveillance and trying to lose the surveillance. So they decide we're going to stop him and make a motor vehicle stop. So he makes a motor vehicle stop and he's taken out of the vehicle and searched. And in his wallet, they find another $20 gold certificate, which turns out to be more ransom money. So they have him passing the $10 gold certificate, and now he's in possession of the ransom money again. Hauptmann asks why he was stopped, and at this point in time, they don't want to let on that it's the Lindbergh investigation, and they just say that they're looking into a case of counterfeit money. He was asked about buying gas and stating that he had 100 more of these gold certificates at home, and he readily admits, he goes, I have more bills at home. So Hauptmann is immediately handcuffed and arrested. And there's a picture of Hauptmann there in custody. And they drive back to the Hauptmann residence to conduct a search. Well, this attracts a crowd. This becomes a media circus again. But during the search, they find slippers in his wife's closet, which is purchased from a store that had been traced back. One of the ransom bills had been traced back to this store's deposit in the past. They also find missing wood in his garage attic floor that matched wood that was made to create the ladder. And they find $14,000 worth of the ransom money in a tin can in the garage and also a gun. There is the public attention. You can see the dirt road in between the Hauptmann house and the garage there on the right. These are the police searching the garage. They dug up the floor. They literally demolished this garage looking for evidence. There is money rolled up in one of the rafters with the small gun. And then you can see this varnished shellac container that had additional ransom money hidden inside it. So Hauptmann is arrested. He's booked into New York City. He is then indicted in New York for extortion on September 26th. And then October 8th, he is indicted in New Jersey for murder. And October 19th, he is formally extradited from New York to New Jersey. They can't just take him over state lines. That would be kidnapping. Even today, if I want to arrest an individual and he's out of state, I have to extradite him through the court system to have him legally transported into my jurisdiction. So here's a quick video. It kind of gives you an idea of what we're talking about.
25 years ago, the last chapter began in the tragic Lindbergh kidnapping. A police net closed in on Bruno Richard Hauptmann, ending a 2-year hunt for a man who kidnapped and then killed the infant son of Charles Lindbergh. In Hauptmann's New York garage was found $14,000 in marked bills. Other damning evidence, an artist's sketch from a description by the ransom go-between. Handwriting specimens that definitely link the Bronx carpenter with the crime. And written on a door, the phone number of Dr. Condemn, the innocent agent who paid the ransom. Circumstantial evidence overwhelming in its impact. J. Edgar Hoover, Norman H. Schwarzkopf of the New Jersey State Police, Police Commissioner Bryan, the men who led the relentless hunt for the man whose crime aroused the nation perhaps more than any other in those turbulent years 25 years ago. The Jersey court had indicted Hauptmann kidnapping and murder. Arrested in New York, he was arraigned on criminal extortion charges and put under heavy bail pending extradition. More than 2 years after the actual kidnapping, the arrest of Hauptmann caused a national sensation.
So the trial begins on January 3rd, 1935 in Flemington, New Jersey, and it lasts 5 weeks. And this becomes the trial of the century, right? We talk about O.J. Simpson as being the trial of the century. This really was the trial of the century. Here's another quick video about the trial. They had people crawling in windows to get into the courtroom.
Grim drama is played out at Flemington, New Jersey. Crowds besiege the courthouse in the hope of seeing Hauptmann fight for his life. But a normally quiet town is crammed with scores of reporters, photographers, and newsreel cameramen from all over the world.
So they bring in the evidence, right? Here's the ladder. The ladder really becomes the key piece of evidence. The wood that the ladder was built from matched the garage attic, and it matched to not only just the wood, but the nail pattern, the grain, and the length. And tool marks from his tools matched tool marks on the ladder that, from when it was built, right? Remember, Hauptmann was a carpenter. On the left, you see a sketch that was found in Hauptmann's home. On the right, you see the actual kidnapping ladder, right? Meaning the design he sketched on how he's going to build it and then what he built there. Then you have the garage attic floor. You can see there was sawdust. You can see the rafter nail hole pattern matched patterns on the wood that was taken from the ladder. You can see on the right-hand side the grain, how the grain matched to where it was cut out of the attic floor. So very conclusively showing that this ladder was built by Hauptmann and was taken from his garage and then left at the scene of the kidnapping. Here are actually tool marks, based upon, the tools found in his garage and tool marks that were on the ladder itself. So that was the key piece of evidence, but it wasn't the only evidence. He had similar tools, right? Remember, there was a chisel found at the crime scene, right? Well, that's the one on the top. And then there's another chisel found in his garage, the same set, same tool set, and that 3/4 inch chisel that was found at the scene was missing from the garage set. So again, tools indicating Hauptmann was involved. And then this is the one you can't make up, right? In Hauptmann's closet, there is a phone number and address of Dr. Condon written down, right? So he's taking notes as the kidnapper, and he's writing them down on the wall of his closet. And then obviously they have the ransom money that's found in the garage. Handwriting experts testify that the handwriting matched the ransom notes. Take that with a grain of salt. There's been modern handwriting analysis that says they don't match. But again, don't forget, there's multiple people that I believe are involved in this crime. So just because it doesn't match Hauptmann doesn't mean it didn't match somebody else. But they do come to the conclusion that there is one writer, and all the same paper came from like the same package, right? When you buy 100 sheets of paper, they all have the same watermark, the same envelopes, that kind of stuff. The writing was indicated in the Germanic style and words, characteristics, double hyphen, that kind of stuff. And there was also signs of deception or disguise, meaning that the person writing it was intentionally trying to hide his handwriting style. Hauptmann was also ID'd by Lindbergh, Condon, and the taxi driver. There's some, you can make your own conclusions on, Hauptmann's writing versus the anonymous letters writing, whether you feel that's similar or not. I do. Hauptmann stopped working shortly after the ransom was paid. His claim was that he began playing the stock market. He was now a day trader. That's how he explained the funds that were in his account after the kidnapping. He also made hunting trips with his wife back to Germany. So he started spending money. He did have a prior criminal record. In 1919 in Kamenz, Germany, right? The press picked upon this. He robbed 2 women who were pushing a baby carriage, right? Baby kidnapping, baby carriage. But the one that I'm actually put a little bit of more, faith in is he also was arrested for burglarizing the mayor's house using a ladder and entering through a second-story window, right? So he's kind of got that MO going on. So in February of 1935, a guilty verdict is returned, and he is sentenced to death by the electric chair. But the state offers him a deal to spare his life. They say, if you give up your co-conspirators, we will spare your life. But he refuses. He goes to his death claiming innocence, claiming that he was not involved. FBI profiles say that this really is not unusual. There's multiple people out there. There's a bulk of the ransom money has not been discovered. Perhaps his wife and child are going to be taken care of by these other people if he keeps quiet. So there's reasons why he, if he gets put to death and he claims his innocence, his wife, which she actually did do, goes on for the rest of her life, fighting to clear his name, maintaining that he was innocent. Despite numerous appeals and pleas for clemency, they are disregarded. And on April 3rd, 1936, like a full year after the guilty verdict, he is executed at Trenton State Prison. And here's a little bit about the trial.
The trial continued for weeks as the state built its case. There were moments of high drama, as when Charles A. Lindbergh, a national hero, testified. America watched with chilled fascination as he confronted the killer of his infant son. The chain of damning evidence grew. The kidnap ladder, proved made in Hauptmann's workshop. The baby's sleeping suit, tendered in return for the ransom money, identified at the trial by Mrs. Lindbergh. Handwriting analysis proved Hauptmann wrote the ransom note. Finally, the testimony of Dr. John F. Condon, Jaffe, the ransom go-between, identifying Hauptmann as the man he'd paid the $50,000. Fighting desperately for his life, Hauptmann took the stand, still maintaining his innocence in the face of the state's tight-linked web of evidence, but badly shaken by the raking cross-examination of Attorney General Willents.
Didn't you swear to untruth in the Bronx courthouse? No, sir. Didn't you swear to untruth in the courthouse? Didn't you lie on the road? Time and time again, didn't you? I did not. You did not? No. All right. When you were arrested with this Lindbergh ransom money, you had a $20 bill. Lindbergh ransom money, did they ask you where you got it? Did they ask you? You did. Did you lie to them or did you tell them the truth? Did you lie to them or did you tell them the truth? I said not the truth. You lied, didn't you? I did, yes. Yeah.
After hours of suspense, the jury returned the verdict that brought to an end the courtroom drama and the Lindbergh's 3-year ordeal of grief and public spectacle. The verdict was guilty of murder in the first degree. Hauptmann refused to admit guilt to the very moment he paid with his life for what was called the crime of the century 25 years ago.
So that brings us to the conspiracy theories. Did he act alone, right? The profilers that looked at this case suggested he needed support, right? You have the lookouts, you have the woman at the market, you have the witnesses saying that there's multiple people, you have the multiple footprints, multiple vehicles, right? So all the evidence points to the fact that there's multiple people involved, yet Hauptmann is the only one arrested and charged, and he's maintaining innocence. Babies are notoriously difficult to take care of. I have two. My daughter's homesick today. I know that it's a lot of work to take care of children, right? So there has to be some preparation, right? And the cemetery John himself told Condon that there's 5 people involved, 3 men and 2 women. Hauptmann only had 1/3 of the ransom. Where's the rest? To this day, the other 2/3 of the ransom money has never been recovered. So all you out there that have grandparents that, you got to go through all those boxes in their attics, you may want to go take a look and go see if you have some, ransom money sitting somewhere. But the investigation stopped after Hauptmann's arrest. They did not go on. It did not continue. The police investigated all construction workers on the Hopewell home. The Hopewell area was very rural. It was very private. There was lots of farms and woods. And there were only 3 homes within a mile of the Lindberghs, right? So there were only 3 roads in and out of this area. The Lindberghs were not particularly well liked by the locals. They were considered to be aloof and outsiders, and that their property was former hunting grounds for the locals. And here he is, he's building this big estate. He actually had plans to build a private airport. So some of the locals were perhaps viewed as suspects, but they looked at all these locals and nothing panned out. Then you have Violet Sharp, who was one of the domestic maids employed at the Morrow estate. She's interviewed 4 times by police. Each time she was uncooperative and nervous. The first time she's interviewed, she states she went on a blind date to the movies, but doesn't give any details, nervous and agitated. The second interview, she changes her story. She says she went dancing in the oranges with an individual named Ernie. Now, Ernie was not a criminal per se, but maybe like a nefarious character, not a very reputable character. But again, she is nervous and refused to answer many questions. So the third interview with police, she is so highly agitated that she begins hyperventilating, and the interview has to be suspended for them to get a doctor. And they indicate to her, we're going to interview you a 4th time. So they advise her to prepare for a 4th interview. The police are going to pick her up and drive her to the Hopewell house. But when the police arrived, she ran upstairs in the Morrow estate and she drinks silver polish and she kills herself. She commits suicide. So some people point to Violet Sharp as being involved in the crime. Her sister had returned to England without informing police and applied for her visa the day of the kidnapping. Despite this, I don't think she's a viable suspect. The police suspect that she may have been an informer to the kidnappers, or perhaps she felt guilty and inadvertently gave up info to somebody who was asking, maybe somebody was probing for information and she inadvertently gave up information. Now she feels guilty and she's afraid. There was a New York reporter that did state that he did get a scoop from her and paid her for a scoop, and she did have some seedy contacts. The Lindbergh family told all their employees that if anyone talked to the press that they would be fired. She was an immigrant from England, and she didn't have family here. She didn't have a lot of money, so she could have been, felt bad about giving up the scoop to the New York reporter and afraid for losing her job. She also obviously did have some mental health issues that she was dealing with as well. She was a very nervous individual, but I don't find her to be a really viable suspect. I think it's more likely that she was just very nervous over perhaps inadvertently giving up info and the scoop that she gave to the New York reporter. Then there's a suspect, Isidore Fish. Now, some of you may be wondering what Hauptmann's claim was for why he had this ransom money. And he claimed that this money belonged to his friend, Isidore Fish. That's Isidore Fish there on the right. Isidore Fish was often destitute, sleeping in parks, even after the kidnapping. So if he was involved in the kidnapping and had $14,000, why was he sleeping in parks? Why was he not using this money? And in 1934, Fish actually returned to Germany and dies in Germany, homeless and destitute. So he dies before anyone is arrested. He dies before anyone can interview him or get his side of the story. So he's a very easy scapegoat for Hauptmann to blame this money on him. And Hauptmann claimed that his friend owed him money, so he felt entitled to just use the money, and that's why he was spending this money. I don't believe that to be a very viable. That's too convenient. I don't believe him to be a viable suspect either. Then you have individuals that suspect Charles Lindbergh himself. Charles Lindbergh, if you know his history, he did flirt with fascism for a while. He was the head of America First. He did have some connections with the Nazis before the war. And he was a believer in eugenics. And eugenics is the biological racial theory of racial superiority. And the fact that his baby may have had rickets, those curled toes, people point to that, and his belief in eugenics is saying, I'm a master I'm a member of the master race, yet my baby has a deformity. This is going to be against my beliefs. So it is possible that Lindbergh either wanted to have his child killed, or maybe less evil, wanted to have his child placed into like an asylum or a medical institution and out of the limelight, out of the public's view. They point to the fact that he forgot his Tuesday night engagement in New York City and that he was home during the kidnapping. He was very controlling, interfered with the investigation by all accounts. So maybe he was making sure everything went well. I don't put a lot of faith in this one. Lindbergh, yes, was controlling. The rickets actually has a pretty reasonable explanation. His wife was also a pilot. At this point in time, airplanes were not pressurized. So she flew while she was pregnant, and you have a lower oxygen atmosphere. It's very possible that that contributed to some deformities with the child. And you know, it's a matter of simplicity, right? That's a very convoluted story to explain something that fits some, you know, sensationalist traits with Lindbergh. More often than not, people just do the simple thing, right? If you want to get your baby into an institution, you just put them into an institution. They don't have to go through this big charade to do that. So my personal feeling is Lindbergh, not involved, not a suspect. And then you come to John Knoll. John Knoll is the suspect, brand new suspect brought through by a 2012 book called Cemetery John by Bob Zorn, which is the one that Andrew recommended at the beginning. I think this is a really interesting theory. I don't agree with it 100%, but I'm going to bring you through it real quick. The author's father, Gene, read an article in 1963 in Life magazine that triggered a memory that he had in 1930s. And this is the summer of 1931 when he was 15 years old. He lived in a German neighborhood in the Bronx. And Gene is invited by his neighbor, a German individual, to go to Palisades Amusement Park in New Jersey. And while he's there, his neighbor is speaking German with John Knoll's brother Walter, and a man that they refer to as Bruno. Now, Hauptmann's name was Bruno Richard Hauptmann. They mentioned Englewood, and the author believes that John Knoll was John, who was Cemetery John, who collect the ransom money at the cemetery. Knoll fits the physical description and the sketch. This is a picture of John Knoll on the right. There's a sketch of the suspect on the left. I think that's a pretty good likeness right there. John Knoll had an abnormality on his thumb. Now, Condon, when he met Knoll, or when he met Cemetery John in the cemetery, he described that the kidnapper had an abnormality on his thumb. And you can see a photo of Knoll here with like this fleshy mass on his thumb. So there's another characteristic. Some of the ransom money had what they described as a greasy feel. And when they examined this turned out to be animal fat. Both Knoll and his brother Walter, they worked at a delicatessen slicing deli meat. So that could have been a source of animal fat. And Zorn's landlord was from Kamenz. Now, Kamenz is the same town where Hauptmann was from in Germany, and he was a friend of the Knoll family. So there was a connection there as well. Zorn is given a stamp collection. Knoll becomes very generous. This is a very poor immigrant family. He gives his stamp collection to the child after the kidnapping. 3 weeks before the trial, Knoll and his wife, they sail to Germany. They go on 2 first-class tickets, which cost them about $700, which would have been the equivalent of about 6 years' rent for them. The day Hauptmann is convicted, they leave Europe and return to the United States after the trial. And if you look on that photo on the right-hand side there, that's Noel and his wife in the back there against that door window there. There are some potential problems with Noel as a suspect. I'm not going to say it's foolproof, right? They refer to the third man being called Bruno, and while Bruno's name was Bruno Richard Hauptmann, even as a child, he always went by Richard Hauptmann. Modern handwriting analysis indicate that both Hauptmann and Noel are have negative scores for the handwriting, but however, we have witnesses saying 3 men. It is possible that there's a third man that wrote the letters, right? Potentially Walter, Noel's brother. And then you have the object of who's in charge, right? Hauptmann is older. He's more established than Noel. Why would he take the fall? Why would he go to his death for these other individuals? But I like the fact that it fits kind of, you have Noel and his wife, Hauptmann and his wife, and the brother Walter, right? That's 3 men and 2 women involved in the kidnapping. You also have 1/3 of the kidnapping money, ransom money, going to Hauptmann, maybe 1/3 going to Walter, and 1/3 going to John and his wife. My conclusion is that Hauptmann is definitely 100% guilty. He's involved. He was involved in this. I have no doubt in my mind, based on the evidence, that he's involved. I also have no doubt in my mind that he did not act alone. There's just too many witnesses, too many facts that support multiple people being involved. John Noel is a good suspect in my estimation. Lindbergh not involved. And a quick note on the DNA, right? The state of New Jersey refuses to release evidence for DNA examination that was held by the State Police Museum regarding this case. A lot of people point to the fact that that's part of the conspiracy, that's part of the cover-up, that they're refusing to release this DNA evidence. What's more likely is the fact that the Lindbergh estate withdrew anything from display that potentially had DNA evidence. Lindbergh was a known womanizer. He had many children out of wedlock. It's a very wealthy family. There have been illegitimate children in Europe that have successfully sued the Lindbergh estate for money. And if that DNA was out there and available, it's going to open up the window for more lawsuits potentially to come forward. And I feel that is the reason why this DNA evidence has not been examined. There are some bright spots that came out of this case. You have the Federal Kidnapping Act, which was called the Lindbergh Law at the time. That came out. This was enacted 3 months after the Lindbergh abduction and murder, and it became a federal offense to have a kidnapping that passed state lines and allowed the feds to investigate it versus multiple municipal and local jurisdictions. That is my presentation. I am very happy to take questions and answers at this point in time. My contact information is there, my phone number, my website, my email. You can see some of my other presentations that are currently available. And if you are so inclined, there is a link on my website and also that QR code. It goes to my Google page where you can leave me a review. I'm happy to have a good review or constructive criticism, but it does help me get my name out there, and I appreciate you taking the time to leave me a review if you feel so inclined. Otherwise, Andrew, I'll open it up to questions, and thank you everyone for being a great audience.
All right. Thank you so much, James. We really, really appreciate it. If anybody does have questions, you can use the Q&A or the chat, and we can't wait to hear what questions you might have. The first question, this case continued to have hoaxes. In 1948, there was an article in the Courier News that a table was found with a note attached to it,
Yes.
which is described as a confession note. And 8 years later, the table was bought in 1940 in Plainfield, but 8 years later, the note was found and was later determined to be a hoax. Were any of the people who reported hoaxes ever prosecuted? And were any of these hoaxes ever looked at again by later investigators?
So if you want to go down a rabbit hole and spend all your time, there are multiple forums out there regarding this case. There are a lot of conspiracy theories about this case. I could have done hours talking about this. I picked the ones that I felt were the most interesting, but I am familiar with the table. One unique thing about the table is if you unscrew allegedly from what I've been able to read, if you unscrew the table leg, there are holes in the table where that line up with the 3 holes in that quote unquote signature. So some people have pointed to that. And another interesting tidbit is the note actually refers to the German American Bund, which is that Nazi organization that kind of got me into my research and presenting. So I thought that was a little interesting tidbit. I don't know the outcome of all the hoaxes and whether people were prosecuted. I can tell you even today, unless they cause damage or unless they cause a problem with the investigation that, it hurts the investigation. Unfortunately, sometimes it's more of a hassle to follow up and actually prosecute people that way. So a lot of times hoaxes are just found out to be hoaxes and then dismissed. Yeah, people are continuously reevaluating these theories. I'm not going to call them all conspiracy theories. There are some good ones, like the Knoll one, I believe. They are continuously, and that Knoll book only came out in 2012. So this is still a case that is actively reviewed, very much has a lot of public interest, and it's not done. This story is not fully told, right? There's still 2/3 of that ransom money out there. There's still, in my estimation, at least 2 or 3 other people, key figures that were involved. There's going to be a dead Beth confession. There's going to be a diary that's discovered or a letter or somebody that comes forward and says, my family member, now that they've died, I can tell the full story. I fully believe that there's more to be told in this presentation or this story.
What are your thoughts about the sister doing the crime?
The sister? What sister? Lindbergh's sister?
Maybe, I don't know, that was all I got.
Yeah, actually, that's something I haven't heard of, and I actually be interested in hearing that theory. That's something I'm not familiar with.
Okay, I'll see if maybe we get a follow-up on
Yeah.
that. And then do you think they killed the boy accidentally?
So my theory is this ladder was basically rated to hold about 150 pounds. Hauptmann weighed about 150 pounds, right? They had to keep it light and small to transport it. While it was on the wall, it was sufficient to hold him going up into the room. As he came down, he's got the baby, and anyone who stepped on a scale knows, like, when you first step on the scale, it shoots up to like 500 pounds, right? Like you're stepping down and you have that initial higher, pressure going down on it. So I believe him stepping down on this ladder plus the weight of the child caused the ladder to break. The ladder broke. That's what the sound and the scrapes in the wall are for. And they found the ladder broken. I believe the baby was accidentally dropped. I believe that the baby was not intended to be killed right away, although there are some, babies are hard to take care of. Why are we going to spend all this money taking care of the baby? Let's just kill it and get the ransom money. But I feel that it was accidental, that the baby crushed his skull during the fall, and that they discovered it, 4 miles away and panicked and said, we're just going to throw the baby in the woods. That's my theory. I think that best fits the facts of the case. But again, it's open interpretation. There are people that feel the baby was killed. There are people that feel that the baby was shot. There are other things that could have happened that are not ruled out. But my personal feeling is that it was an accident.
In regards to the sister, Anne Murrow's sister, who Lindbergh dated prior to Anne.
Oh, Anne Morrow. Okay, yeah. So Anne, that one I'm not real familiar about. I thought maybe you thought Violet Sharp's sister who left, she was not involved. I'm really not familiar with that one, but this is one of the reasons I love doing these presentations. I'm going to go on today and I'm going to look up that link and or that aspect of the investigation, and if I can find anything out about that, maybe I'll incorporate it into future presentations. I appreciate the feedback.
I guess the local banks did not have the gold certificate serial numbers or didn't check them as people brought them in.
They did, but you can imagine, how many thousands of bills that they're handling every day. And it's a tedious thing to check serial numbers. I can assure you of that. So as this case went on and on and on, you have people that are becoming lazy or just not checking it as often. And that's why the Federal Reserve banks started discovering the bills and not the local banks. And that's why they refocused their efforts on the larger bills, which bore fruit and was able to emerge a suspect at that point in time. So I'm going to try to go through. I don't see the Q&A, but I see the chat here. I'm going to try to go through some of these questions here. Thank you for everyone telling me that you enjoyed the presentation. Let's see, I did see some questions in here. Very interesting. I saw this. Fantastic. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you. My father told me about the Lindbergh Kidnapping experience all the time. Do you think they could? Oh, a little side note. I did this presentation over the summer, and an individual was in the audience who he was a New Jersey State police officer who had just been hired. He was like in his his probationary period, and he actually worked in the state police lab that processed the evidence. And he was, one of the individuals that was watching as the evidence was processed, as he was, a 2-month-old rookie on the force. So I thought that was really cool from my point of view. What was the name of the book you mentioned? It's called Cemetery John, and the author is named Zorn, Zorn. Highland Park. Yeah, I mean, there are Lindbergh as a suspect. I'm not really dismissing him, but I find that, or I'm not dismissing him quickly, but I find that that's more sensationalism. I feel that if Lindbergh wanted to get the baby out of the picture, there were easier ways to do it. And in my estimation, criminals are lazy. People are lazy. They don't want to go through this big charade and song and pony dance when they could just get the baby into its institution. I'm not saying it's 100% he wasn't involved. I'm just saying there's too much to explain what people point to as his involvement, that I don't think he's a viable suspect. I do think it was accidental, but there is some evidence that said it could be on purpose. Mentioned the book. Do you have a presentation? I do not have a presentation on Anne Morrow, unfortunately. Thank you. As far as a link for the presentation, I think, Andrew, you're going to handle that?
Yep.
Okay. I have heard a lecture, good case for Lindbergh's involvement. I would be open to hearing it. He definitely was cheating. She was definitely fed up with the cheating. The baby did have problems, but I think there's explanations, which I mentioned. Theory Charles involved campaign advocate did not want to know his child's deformed. It is true, but I still think there's easier ways he could have got him into an institution. Group of smaller from parents to remember the relatives. Interesting, so interesting. Table. Yeah, I mean, I do like the table is very interesting. I just think it's been disproved, but you never know, right? The table is an interesting one, I thought. Excellent, interesting one. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Grandfather, close friend. Whoever has that information in their basement, reach out to me. Send me an email. I'd love to talk to you. Brother's retired, loves history, love to view your presentation. You can view the video, or you can go to my website and see my upcoming schedule of presentations. If you go to my webpage, at the bottom of the homepage, the main page, you'll see my presentation, which is updated as I add presentations around there. Also, you can let your local library know about me, and they can reach out to me and try to book me as well. Thank you for keeping up the good work. Andrew's going to send it. Yep, send me the book there. Thank you. I don't think Hauptmann's a scapegoat. I think he's involved, but I don't think he's the only one that was involved. I think he took the fall for everyone else. Yeah, very talkative. I did find that unique too. Too many times I've interviewed people now and people go tell me to pound salt, but I look at interviews, I look at video from the past, and people were just more forthcoming. So, maybe it's just a different time period. He was definitely a Nazi sympathizer up to the war started. He was a cheater. I wouldn't put something behind him, and that's why you get a lot of those theories, but I just don't think the theories are strong enough. Now you please. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. Andrew, you have any other questions?
No. Yeah, I think we can go ahead and end it there. I really, really appreciate everything, James. This is a fantastic presentation.
Thank you. I
And
really
really
appreciate you
enlightening.
having me over.
Absolutely. And as has been discussed, this program is recorded. Once the recording is available, I will send a link to everybody who registered for it, and it will be on our state library's YouTube channel. So look out for that. And I just want to close with everybody be safe, be well, and hopefully we'll see you soon.
Thank you, everybody.